All right, today we're diving into what feels like a high stakes quest, the mission to create a truly sustainable fuel for airplanes, all from waste plastics. It's called Sustainable Aviation Fuel, or SAF for short. And honestly, it could be the key to the future of flying.
You know, this quote just nails it. Why do people in the know call SAF the Holy Grail? Well, because it's easily the most valuable prize in the entire fuels market, but it's also the hardest one to get your hands on. Everybody wants it, but making it? That's a whole different story.
And look, the reason this whole quest is so incredibly urgent is simple. For those big jets that fly us across oceans and continents, there really is no plan B. You can't just plug in a Boeing 787. That means liquid fuel is going to be absolutely essential for decades to come, which creates this massive problem. How in the world do you decarbonize an industry that literally has no other choice?
Okay, so let's dig into that a little more. Why is SAF really considered aviation's holy grail? It's not just one option among many. For the foreseeable future, it is the only solution that can be scaled up to decarbonize the entire airline industry. This really breaks down the hard reality of modern aviation. Batteries? Nope, way too heavy for a long flight. What about hydrogen? It's promising for sure, but the storage challenges are just immense. And here's the kicker. The planes we have flying right now have a service life of 25 to 30 years, so we're kind of locked in. So when you cross off all the things that just won't work, what are you left with? For the next few decades, the only scalable answer is SAF. Okay, so every quest has its rules, right? And this one is being driven by some seriously powerful market forces. So let's take a look at the huge regulatory and commercial pressure that's creating what is essentially a guaranteed multi-billion-dollar demand for this stuff.
Just take a look at this timeline. This is the regulatory push in action. The European Union's mandate. It's not a suggestion, it's the law. Starting in 2025, a full 2% of all jet fuel has to be SAF. And from there, it just ramps up like crazy. 20% by 2035 and an incredible 70% by 2050. That creates a mandatory market that is just growing and growing.
So you've got that regulatory shove, right? But you also have this huge pull from corporations that want to slash their travel emissions. And that creates a massive financial incentive. I mean, look at these numbers. A company could potentially sell pyrolysis-based SAF for 4 to 5 times more than conventional jet fuel. That, right there, is the prize everyone's chasing. All right, so we get the why, there's huge demand, crazy price premiums. Now let's get into the how. Let's chart the technical course for this journey. The incredibly complex process of turning raw pyrolysis oil into a fuel that is pure enough to power a jet engine. Look, before a single drop of this stuff can get anywhere near an airplane, it has to pass this incredibly tough certification process. And this is the rulebook, ASTM D7566. You can think of it as the ultimate gatekeeper for any new aviation fuel. If you don't meet every single one of these specs, you can't fly. End of story. And right here, we hit our first massive roadblock on this quest. As of right now, there is no dedicated, fully approved pathway under ASTM for turning pyrolysis oil directly into jet fuel. Now, there are some workarounds like co-processing it in a big traditional refinery, but that direct, pure play route, it's still waiting for the official green light. And that is a huge hurdle. So, for the pioneers on this quest, the journey to actually make this fuel is a pretty intense 5-step transformation. First, you have to stabilize and clean up the raw oil. Then you purify it with hydrogen under extreme pressure to get rid of every last contaminant. Steps 3 and 4 are all about reshaping the molecules themselves, cracking them, reshaping them, and then distilling out that perfect jet fuel fraction. It's a real chemical engineering gauntlet. But you know, inside that whole complex journey, there's one test, one trial that is harder than all the rest. This is the single biggest challenge that any pyrolysis-based SAF has to overcome to have a shot at success. So I gotta ask you, out of all the dozens of things this fuel has to be, pure, stable, energy-dense, what do you think is the single toughest spec to nail? The answer is minus 47 degrees Celsius. That's the absolute maximum freezing point allowed for Jet A1 fuel. And why so ridiculously low? Well, picture this. You're at 35,000 feet, and the air outside is minus 60 degrees. The last thing you want is for the fuel in the wings to turn into an icy slush. If that happens, the engines starve. So yeah, failure is not an option here.
And this isn't just a temperature thing, it's a molecular problem. Pyrolysis oil that comes from plastics is just full of these long, straight, waxy molecules you see on the left. Think of them like a handful of uncooked spaghetti. They tangle up and clump together really easily. That's exactly what they do in the cold. To pass the test, you have to transform them into the compact, branched molecules on the right, which can flow freely no matter how cold it gets. So, how do they do it? Well, the chemical magic behind this transformation is a process called isomerization. It's a big word, but what it does is it takes those straight chain molecules and completely restructures them, giving them branches. It's kind of like turning a bunch of straight logs that would jam up a river into rounded branches that can just flow smoothly past each other. This step is absolutely critical to hitting that minus 47-degree target. Okay, so we've seen the absolute mountain they have to climb, technically speaking. So let's pull back and do the final calculation. Weigh the incredible prize against the very real perils that still stand in the way.
Let's talk about the prize again, because honestly, it is absolutely enormous. Just look at this table. A company that cracks this could sell their fuel for 4 to 5 times more than regular jet fuel. For any company that can solve this puzzle, the economic reward is just undeniable. This is what's fueling the entire quest.
But you gotta balance that prize against the peril, right? So why isn't this stuff everywhere? Well, first, that official pathway still isn't fully certified. Second, the whole technical process, especially hitting that freezing point, is super difficult and very expensive. Third, it's got to compete with the current market leader, which is made from much easier to process used cooking oil. And finally, the very same pyrolysis oil is also in high demand to just make new plastics. So where does that leave us? What's the final verdict? Well, for anyone making pyrolysis oil right now, SAF is this massive future prize, but it's not a market they can just jump into today. The real focus now has to be on laying the groundwork, improving the quality of the oil, building partnerships with refiners, and working together to get that all-important pathway certified. Which really just leaves us with this final question. The journey is incredibly difficult, the technical trials are intense, and the cost is really high. But the prize is nothing less than the future of sustainable flight. So will pyrolysis oil and its pioneers actually win aviation's holy grail? Well, that is the multi-billion-dollar question that this entire industry is racing to answer.